Welcome, Left Reckoning patrons. I'm Matt Leck. With me, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, brother. How's it going?
I'm doing very well. I'd like to wish you a very kill the white farmer on this Sunday afternoon. Sorry. I just want to pause. I have been reading about Julius Malema and the EFF in South Africa, and I gotta say, fascinating. Sort of dynamics there, and we've sort of been aware of this. I'm pretty sure we talked about Malema with Michael back when the white genocide.
He got in trouble, and I won't do a bad South African accent, but he got in trouble like back in maybe 2017, 2018 for a video similar to this that went viral, and he's like, he's like expropriation without compensation, right? Expropriation without compensation. And I remember playing that on TMBS.
That's the thing is, it turns out that that's really the thing that's making everybody afraid in South Africa, because the kill the white farmer thing, which white farmer translates to Boer. Even Malema is very clear. And I'm not going to vouch for everything Malema said in his rhetoric, but he's a provocative guy. But he's clear that this means the power structure, and that it's the map is very clear. It's like the same way Black Power came here in America, which is that okay, we'll extend you some civil rights, and with the hope of that will the economic stuff will follow. And it turns out that it doesn't really. And with South Africa, like land reform is not anywhere near where it should have been, where Mandela said it needed to go. And so now you have this whole group saying like, okay, ANC, you don't want us to be this radical. But yeah, really fascinating. And we just want to be sure Malema's free speech is heard, whether you agree with him or whether you disagree with him. I pretty much agree with them. But I think we'll be doing some EFF Malema stuff in the future. But that's not today. Today we're going to talk about, a white woman who said something we agree with. And it's this woman from Alabama. And I don't know if you've seen this yet, David, but this TikTok went viral from that one crazy 72 woman from Alabama who's basically having an issue. I assume she was born in 72, which makes her about 50. And she's got a son who is making what she understood as like decent money and still can't afford anywhere to live.
Helpless as a parent. Yes, my kids are grown adults. My oldest is 28, my youngest is 25. And I thought by teaching them what I learned, which is you work hard, you get a good job, you're going to get the things in life that you need. Right? Worked for me. Why wouldn't it work for them? Because it doesn't. Because the world has changed. All right. And now I feel like I see them struggling. And before my generation comes at me, yes, I understand struggling is a part of life. We all struggled. But there's a difference between struggling and drowning. All right. So we struggled and it was tough. But you know what? We made it. We knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel with our struggle. It seems like kids today, no matter how much they struggle, they just get further and further down the water into the drowning point. All right. When I was their age, I was making less than $10 an hour, and I can afford to live on my own. Now you have to be making six-figure salary to get a decent, tiny little place to live. So what the is going on, and how do we help them as parents? I told my son, all you have to do is work hard, go to college, or join the military like I did. He went to college, got his degree, got a full-time job. He moved back in with me right when he graduated from college because he said, hey, Mom, as soon as I get a job, which was within 2 weeks of him getting out of college, maybe take me 2 months and I'll save up enough money for me to move out. Okay, cool. It's been 10 months. He has saved almost every dime and still can't afford to live. Why are one-bedroom studio apartments almost $2,000 a month? Why? Like, I just don't get it. So I don't even think that there's even classes anymore. There used to be upper class, middle class, lower class. It's literally turning into the ultra wealthy, and then everybody else is just poor.
So I'll react in a little bit, but I'm curious what your reaction is, David.
I mean, I think it's good. I mean, anything like that you see when you can see the car TikTok record video and they're saying things about how class stratification is getting worse in this country, you're going to get 2 thumbs up for me. I mean, it's true. It's like it's a universal thing. I mean, I know we're going to talk about some of the reaction in a second, which I'm not as familiar with, but I mean, a constant complaint from people our age Is that like, when you talk to, I mean, I guess boomers, right? There is this kind of retroactive understanding that they have about what today is like for people. It's like, oh, when I was your age, I was able to do this. And people are correct in pointing out, it's like, well, hey, a college education was $2,000 when you are our age. This is how much a car costs. This is how much a house costs. I mean, the cost of living in this country has skyrocketed while wages for most people have stayed stagnant. So here's somebody, I think, correctly pointing out these issues, and it's a good piece of propaganda. I mean, like, if you want to be able to push through some of the kind of cultural divisions in society and start building up a movement, having ladies in their cars not complaining about immigrants when they record their TikTok videos, but complain about cost of living crisis is a pretty damn good thing in my book.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to me, and maybe this is, I'm not from Alabama, I'm from North Dakota, but I'll say that woman is very familiar to me.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I feel like I coached her sons on like baseball teams, right? Yeah. And like, and I understand like, okay, something changed. Well, the American dream hasn't, been extended to everybody equally, right? Like, we can address it, we can acknowledge that. And her feeling of like something changed, like, and that's been extended to people who it hasn't been before. But we should acknowledge that, as opposed to say like, well, why didn't you get it? And we'll get to some of the responses that really bugged me. But like, struggle isn't something the rich people have to deal with. That their struggle is, how do I find meaning in life? Which is something we all have to deal with, on top of like, how do I sustain my life? And but like, we need to understand that this struggle, like that and like that she's, I think, coming up against that. I just think, like, to me, my reaction to this was like, this is just positive. Like, this is what we need. This is the raw material for like where we need to go, right? And first, before we get to the majority report audience of it, let's play the response that she got from Fox and Friends. So yeah, Fox and Friends had her on the next morning and didn't meet her with as open arms as the right's not really prepared to field these people either, I guess. Putting my complaints about the left on hold for a second.
An Alabama mom going viral for her rant about her millennial Gen Z kids.
But not for the reason you might think. She says that she feels helpless as a parent as the American dream becomes increasingly difficult for younger generations to attain.
I am so tired of feeling helpless as a parent. Yes, my kids are grown adults. My oldest is 28, my youngest is 25. And I thought by teaching them what I learned, which is you work hard, you get a good job, you're going to get the things in life that you need, right? Worked for me. Why wouldn't it work for them? Because it doesn't. Because the world has changed. Yes, I understand struggling is a part of life. We all struggled, but there's a difference between struggling and drowning.
No kidding. And Jessica,
take out the part about the rent and why does cost as much. But you got to edit some stuff out.
McCabe, who went viral, joins us live. Jessica, good morning to you.
Went viral.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I understand in the aftermath you've been slammed by a lot of Gen Xers who thought that the comments were inappropriate, but your son, who read some of the comments, actually feels like he's less alone. There are a lot of people in the same boat.
Yes, and I think that's one thing that we need to take away from is that it's not 1988 anymore. We have to, as parents, realize that the economy has changed. I understand inflation. Prices always go up. But I think that lately the wages are not keeping up with how big the inflation has gotten. And we have to listen to our children.
We're looking at these beautiful pictures. Gosh, you have gorgeous kids, and it looks like a grandchild there, too. What was your reaction to 11 million people can relate to this and viewed this?
That was a little unexpected because honestly, the reason why I made the video is because I was so frustrated. I went out yet again with my son to go try to find an apartment he can afford. And we just kept getting backdrops or backs. Half the places I felt like should have been condemned that he could afford. And the other half, they were wanting 4 times your rent. They wanted you to show that you can make 4 times that. So I was getting frustrated. But I hear all the other Gen Zs and millennials in my comments saying that they finally feel seen, because I think us as Gen X, we forget that it's not the same as it is now for our kids.
I mean, I've experienced that just in my life, like moving from Fargo to Brooklyn was quite a shock. My last place in was like $500 a month, but that was excessively high because it was my last year in Fargo, and I'm like, screw it. I'm going to be, taking out NYU money. Let's just go for it. I want to live downtown and be able to like not have to drive home after the bars. But typically, like $275, I paid a month to live in a townhome with a bunch of guys. Like, and then you move to New York, and I had to have my parents sign on to the lease. Both of me and my roommate had to have our parents sign on to the lease, and then prove a certain amount of like income. It's insane, the requirements here. And to hear that they're doing that in Alabama now, like, damn. Like, I was hoping to move out of New York so I could escape this, but now the more I hear about it, it's like there's nowhere you can move where these brokers aren't going to like get a nice chunk of change out of you. The realtors aren't going to get a nice bid up front, and also like you're gonna have to prove that you can really make that if you want anything that is like remotely acceptable.
No, I mean, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, here in Austin, the cost of living is out of control, and it's been really apparent too because it's accelerated so much in the past like decade. Where everyday people, the people who keep the city running, the people who are cooking food, the people who are doing all that kind of work. I mean, more and more they can't live in Austin. Right, which is like a very frightening thing to realize, particularly in any city. But like, what makes cities great? What makes cities like Austin a great place to be, like historically? Well, like Austin in particular, it was a place where, if maybe you didn't sort of fit in the kind of cultural mode of where you were from, well, you just moved to Austin. Like, you don't have to make very much to get by. You could work at 7-Eleven, have a little place, maybe have a roommate or whatever, be in a horrible band, right? But live, right? And that's why Austin always has such a vibrant cultural scene. And now, like, now it's like New York prices here for most places. And, you're also car dependent, so you have all of that expense that you don't have in New York. It's something that, like, the only way that you don't know about that is if you have been completely sort of shielded from the reality of renting for a while. Right, which I think is why there's such like a generational divide on understanding what's going on. Because if you don't notice, it's like, oh, what you complain about is like restaurant prices are going up, your favorite places are closing. But if you were still like renting in these kind of cities, it's really difficult to get by. You're constantly, particularly there's like pros and cons. Like New York is awful. Because they have this parasitic industry on top of renting. Brokers fees, for people who don't know about that, they like to get like a decent place, right? It's not even going to affect your rent. You have to pay some guy who opens up the door for you that first day to show you the apartment, sometimes upwards of like $5,000-$6,000. And that doesn't go to your rent. That's just an expense, right? So then if you try to get a place that's not on that market, well, then it means you just have tremendous amounts of competition. It's harder and harder to get a place. Here you don't have that, but you have no rental protections. So your landlord can just jack up your rent. And that happened to a lot of people, particularly over these past couple of years. Like, I know a lot of people got screwed over in New York after like the pandemic slump where they got a nice place and then their rent rose. But here, but there's like at least some level of protection generally there. Like here, your landlord can be like, you know what? I think that this neighborhood now is like a $3,000 a month home. And you could just get that message from your landlord and basically have to find a new place. And then, you're going off and competing with a bunch of other people. I mean, it's hell. And the thing that's scary about it is what you're saying, Matt, is like that realization that there isn't really a break from it, because like Austin's experiencing it, Alabama's experiencing it, Jackson, Mississippi's experiencing it, right? And there's spectrums of like how much rent costs in all these places, but they're also like relative to the amount of income that you can make in those places too, right? And I know like this is something that is not just like a problem of like New York or LA anymore. It's a national housing crisis. A national landlord crisis, frankly, where these companies can just like take so much out of your paycheck each month. So not only is it hard to get a place, when you do get a place, it's hard for you to be able to live any kind of life because, man, you don't really have much budget for buying furniture or like going out to eat or doing all those kind of things. I mean, it dramatically lowers your quality of life. People are rightfully frustrated by it.
And I mean, the student loan crisis isn't part of housing crisis. So half of the loans I took out to pay for NYU went straight to my landlord. Let's go. Let's see how Brian Kilmeade, let's see if they get to solutions in the final third, of this interview.
Right.
Yeah.
And we think, well, we did it, so they should be able to too. And we need to be their advocate. I didn't have kids to watch them suffer their entire life.
Eesh.
Right. And real quick, are your kids going to change careers? What's your advice to them? What have they learned from this, Jessica?
It is frustrating because he went to college, and I understand that most places want experience, even though you had a college degree. So the first job that he got right out of college was only paying $19 an hour. Now that's better than minimum wage, but even since being there, he's gotten a raise, another $22 an hour. That used to be a good amount when I was growing up.
Yeah, me too.
$22 an hour should let you live, and how come it doesn't?
Well, we've got your video on foxandfriends.com. Jessica, thank you very much for joining us live.
Oh, gee, thanks for putting the video on Fox and Friends Live.
Yeah.
That's really going to help my son pay rent.
It's really going to help me like now, by the way, it's got like an incredible amount of views of my video.
Which is sad.
It's not just y'all are trying to get in on the gravy train that I've created.
Right. And it's like, bro, like that's not like, to the extent she's able to monetize this at all, it's not lasting. Like there's
no money on TikTok anyway. Yeah.
Right. Like they're acting as if she won some sort of lottery ticket by going viral. And it's like, no, she used to be a high profile case of like how all this shit's failing.
Well, no way.
Now, I have to find this. I don't know where my tabs keep going. Oh, here it is. Yes. Okay. So we talked about this on Majority Report on Thursday with Brandon Sutton, Matt Binder, and Emma Vigeland. And the reception, like during the live chat, was really great. I think people that watch the full show, I think, are more on the wavelength here. The clipped video has gotten about not quite, but almost probably approaching 250,000 views. So it's going pretty viral. And the comments on there are really upsetting to me, and you'll see why immediately. We call it working class Republicans slowly realizing the American dream is a lie. Go to the first comments here. How do we help the parents? Stop voting for people who are intentionally doing this to your kids. Which is, I'll say, like most politicians. Most politicians are doing this to your kids intentionally because they take real estate money. For over 2 decades, half the country went to the polls and voted for, quote, business-friendly candidates. I want those people to tell me what the fuck they thought, quote, business-friendly meant and what the hell they thought was going to happen. I think what they thought was like, and I part of me can sympathize with all these complaints, but I think people need to exercise empathy here. Like, somebody asked me, like, what about, accountability? Accountability for voters is not in my politics. I will not waste a breath on accountability of any kind of fucking voter. I do not give a shit. Once people have voted, that's it. Let's move on. Let's try to make them vote in a better way next time. Let's try to make votes be able to be more constructive in the future. But like, I don't care about that. And like, it's like, and this sounds a little bit too like, it rhymes, but I want revolution over retribution. I don't care. Like but just continue. They probably thought when they were voting business friendly that was going to be good for them and their families. I agree with that. How can they not realize that this is directly a result of wealth inequality? I just don't like people. Despite this, these are the ones that really.
Well, I mean, just not to get really worked up about that one, but like also like she says that, right? She literally says that there are 2 classes in America right now: the poor and the ultra wealthy. So I don't know. Yeah, you're not listening.
It's like a hipster like territorialism over your fucking ideology you want to be for everybody.
I mean, I think we should stay on message here about like the kind of mentality that this gets. But I will just say, as somebody who, and you know this, Matt, both of us do this for a living, so we get exposed to all these kind of comments. There is always that kind of hipster, like, oh, I've been on this for a while. Where like somebody, like, not even talking about this, like somebody will report something that's going on that, like, well, I already knew that, right? And it's like, okay, man, well, like, if you just had a hunch and now somebody's proven it right, why is that making you mad? Right?
I have a challenge for those people, actually. What more do you know that you can add to it?
Yes.
Prove it. Like that, be productive. Don't just, like, no one cares. No one's handed out medals. But yeah, this next one, despite her analysis, she will continue to vote Republican in support of everything she just complained about. How do you know? Some of these are too long. Oh yeah, and she will walk right into that voting booth next year and vote GQP straight down the ballot. I mean, yeah, you get the picture.
Okay, let's look at like a couple quick things first of all, right? Because look, yes, screw the Republicans, but I'm a socialist. I'm not like a Democratic Party propagandist, right?
Yes.
And what really infuriates me about these kind of conversations is they act as if there's like this other model, because what you were just talking about, Matt, like, well, that's New York City, right? Which is like effectively dominated and controlled by the Democratic Party. I'm just going to go down really fast. This is 2021 information, but the Gini coefficient, which, some people like, we don't even need to get into the Gini coefficient, but it measures, how the inequality in a place, right? And let's look at the most unequal states in the United States of America, right? Puerto Rico, right? And that's unique because it is like effectively a U.S. colony. Right. Now going down, District of Columbia on the mainland, the most unequal state. New York, Louisiana, Connecticut, California, Massachusetts, Florida, New Mexico, West Virginia, New Jersey, Illinois, right?
Right.
The point here is that most of those states, apart from Florida, which again, that's also a recent development of being so dominated by the Republican Party, have Democrats in control. Louisiana being a bit of an outlier, but just in like the kinds of people who have been controlling their ledge historically. But Louisiana has a Democratic governor, right? So this idea that like, oh, you vote this way and then like these things go away is just so wrong. So like to sit here, like, look, you can make arguments about strategic voting. You can say like this party wants to do worse than this party on that, this and that, but acting as if like you get a choice every couple years and you get to choose between more inequality, higher rents and lower wages, or higher wages, lower rents. It's just wrong, because that's not how it works anywhere in this country. Because at the end of the day, these two parties are just managing a system that is set up to exploit people, that is set up so that landlords, people who own property, can extract more value. There might be different rates as to how they do that, but acting as if like this is a democratic question that gets brought to people is just nonsense. So fixating on these kind of things like, oh, well, you voted Republican or you voted Democrat, I'm good, you're bad, misses the entire point, because it's the fundamental system here that's creating these issues, and neither of these parties are doing anything about it. Now, you want to fixate on Alabama for a second. We could have our good friends at the Valley Labor Report just sort of take us through the rogues gallery. But look at like what's the idea here is that and also, do we know which way she's voting? Is it just assumed that because she's looks the way that
News,
she does?
the people assume
because she went on Fox and Friends. Yeah. So I don't know. Who knows?
Which is a faulty assumption. Yeah, you kick the tires on that assumption.
Who knows, right? Who knows? But like, let's just assume what everyone's assuming, that this person's voted Republican their entire life. Voting for the Alabama Democratic Party is not going to fix that kind of issue either, right? The Alabama Democratic Party, save for a few folks, was, for example, completely timid at showing up for the coal miners when they were on their long-term strike in Alabama. They were timid in Bessemer, Alabama during the Amazon Union drive, all these kind of things. You think that party or that institution has like a plan? No, it sucks that American politics is the way that it is. And when you fixate on this kind of false narrative that like, you know what, everyone had a chance, to not have this happen to them, but they made the wrong choice at the polls, completely erases the reality of American politics, which is that you have two parties that are set up to maintain this system, continue this exploitation. And yeah, they might have some different policies, but fundamentally what they are power brokers between the state and capital within their state. And that's why they're able to be dominant, for example, right? That's why, wealthy people in New York donate a shitload of money to the Democratic Party because that's going to help them out with all of their projects and the things that they want to see happen there. Same thing in the South, same thing in the quote unquote red states, right? Like nothing infuriates me more. Like the moralism is like infuriating when you see somebody maybe turning a political corner.
Yes.
But also knowing the reality of American politics too, acting as if there is like this kind of way out that is being presented to people and they're rejecting it is just, if you think that, you have not paid any attention to the Democratic Party in office in any place that it's been in power.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like, look, I understand. I'm not going to fight at people on like, if you want to say Democrats, you want Democrats over Republicans. The idea that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, if they had only taken over the Republicans' terms that like divided them, that our rents would be lower. Mm-hmm. You're in absolute fantasy land. And again, like you only have to look to any state. Like Eric Adams is completely bought by these slumlords. Developers is a very kind word for these people.
California is a state that has had Democratic Party domination for a while. Its Gini coefficient is higher than Mexico, right? You know what I mean? It's just like the idea, like, oh well, maybe it takes, every election you can't fix things. Like we have like decades long processes to see what happens. Well, where
the problem is like they are partnering with the people who are in control of the commodity housing that we all need. Like there's no like, and so like you say like you got that right, lady, and you can thank Reagan, the Bushes, and especially Trump for why there's no middle class. It's like, do we not talk about Obama? Like, do we not talk about the way that recovery was handled and like who got their beaks wet first? Like, do we not like talk about Bill Clinton and like just attacks on welfare,
ending welfare as we know it?
Yeah, right. Like
honestly, frankly, like when it comes to Obama plays a massive role in this because it was his response to the financial crisis that put and flowed so much money into the wealthiest pockets.
Yes.
That has played such a role in inflating property values in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, in Obama, everyone's talking about his, you're welcome for the natural gas or whatever.
Yeah.
The worst comment he ever made was, I think he made it to the bankers during the financial crisis, which is, I'm the one who stands between you and the pitchforks. Mm-hmm. And I think that needs to be brought up more and more because I think more and more people are going to ask like, hey, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm.
And look, I mean, and also like, and who knows the perspective of all these people who respond to their commenters, right? But if your goal in politics, and this is a fundamental thing, I think, even beyond just like those examples, like you have to consider what your goals are in politics. Yeah. For me, I'll just be, I was like, my goals are in politics is that like I grew up really poor in this country. My neighbors, my friends, my community were really poor. My family's very poor. We've all worked our entire lives. And you just can't get ahead in the system. So, you realize that there needs to be a political shift, political change, right? That's where it starts and where it frankly ends for me when it comes to politics. Now, if your desire in politics is to be right and to sort of finger wag at people, right, then this is not only like, this is a great opportunity for you to be able to do that. But this is also all that you're ever going to get, right? This is the height of political achievement for you is that you can sort of talk down to somebody versus maybe trying to figure out a way to get out of this goddamn mess. And look, I'm so exhausted with that kind of mentality. It's truly wicked. And, I think the first episode we did on Left Reckoning was about this kind of thing too, where so-called like liberals, we're celebrating poverty in the South and in quote unquote red states, complaining that the United States federal government spends money on things like Medicaid and Medicare in those states, right? The way that is regularly framed is like, oh, these states are takers and these states are makers. But what you're talking about when you're saying, oh, these states get more money from the federal government than they give back in tax revenue, is that these states are getting money from Medicaid and Medicare and social programs for the poor from the federal government. So like your complaint here is that we're spending too much money making sure that people don't starve in West Virginia and Alabama. That is some of the most anti-human kind of mentality, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like what are you here for? Like Yes. I just can't believe people are that interested in politics without like actual skin in the game. Like this is all you care about is being like, you're just realizing this now. And like, I mean, that should be the whole point. The whole reason that I do this, like, if I didn't think this was a goal of like, to be explicit, moving people against capitalism and getting the economic like sort of levers into the hands of people for human benefit. It's not to be like, you're right or you're wrong. I'd just be watching sports. I'd be like, yeah.
You know, yeah, no, me too. But like also like, look, this kind of argument would have more legs for me, or this kind of attitude would have more legs if in this country, for example, you had just a viable kind of Bernie Sanders style politics. So maybe not even the most radical, like overthrow the system kind of stuff, but like, hey, let's come after the billionaires. Hey, let's do Medicare for all. And those guys are regularly going up for office all across the country and we're losing. Right. And, you know, then maybe you could talk about, well, these people were offered a way out and they were rejecting it. But you guys got to remember, for example, like what a Southern Democrat is like. Most of those guys are effectively like Ronald Reagan politically, but they're just sort of like, oh, we don't like some of the excesses of the Republican Party. Frankly, a lot of them, too, are just like from political families where before the big shift between the Republican and the Democratic Party happened in the South. And they just, you know, for maybe historical social reasons, never wanted to jump ship when, you know, the party sort of flipped in the South. Right. You know, so like the idea, too, that like, oh, well, you're regularly rejecting change here is just so ridiculous to me. Knowing the state of the Alabama Democratic Party in particular. And also, I'll just say it again, knowing also you can't make this fucking argument, man. We have like the thing about the American system right now is you have examples of what happens in different places with different parties in control. And look, you can look at some of the things, for example, like some of the positives that have happened in a state like Minnesota. But also, like, you have to look at what's going on in New York or in California. Like the Minnesota thing, the only reason we talk about it is because it's sort of extraordinary generally for how Democrats typically operate when they're in power.
And even Minnesota, which has experienced some success on the housing inflation front, well, also spent like $1 billion in pride and stuff, but also is, you know, there's like rent control in St. Paul, but the rent control in Minneapolis got disemboweled. And so it's like, I hope all of that money that's going into real estate in Minneapolis doesn't, I'm pretty sure it's going to have good short-term effects to help people rent. But what is the long-term effects when you're not keeping the landlords under control and they're getting that influx of cash? Are they just going to raise rents even more on the people that we just helped? Like, you can't do, to me, it's like, and I talk like it's a fine line. We talked about this on Majority Report. Like Emma highlighted it, and I'm like, look, I like it. I like giving people money to pay for like rent assistance, right? I even if it's means tested, look, whatever, get the money out the door, get people in apartments, but you're at the same time going to weaken rent control. I'm worried about that. And that's where we're at. And so it's like, okay, if you want to feel high and mighty about voting Democrat, at least like say I'm voting for these like rent controllers, right? Like, don't just say like, man, like you vote for the GQP because, man, the Democratic Party is not any. Like, I'd be surprised if they take less money than the GOP overall from real estate.
Oh, no, definitely
like,
not.
There's no way that. Exactly. So, like, they're even more bought than the Republicans just on a money and politics level.
Well, the last thing I'll say about money and politics, too, is like, I remember Elon Musk got in trouble for this a few years back. Right, before his sort of halo fell off of his head, and back in the day when it was like Matt and I and Michael saying this guy sucks, and everyone was like, "Well, I like how much of an inventor he is and the great work he's doing."
He's electric car. He's making that popular.
But I remember a kind of early scandal for him was all of the money that he gives to the Republican Party. And Elon Musk said something I think that was very true. He said, "Well, this is what you do when you run a company." Is you give money to everybody so everybody sort of has a connection or a reason not to upset you so much. And that's what business and wealthy people do across the board in this country. Because, again, going back, to what we're saying about like, oh, what is the big difference between like a red state and a blue state? Well, it's like what donation is going to give you more bang for your buck? Are you going to donate to a bunch of New York City Republicans? Yeah, give them a little bit of money, maybe see something happens. But
lottery
give a
ticket.
shitload of money to the people in power there so that they pick up the phone when you call. So these the class politics for the wealthy, at least, this is just like who's in power here. We're going to support them and give them money because they're going to help us out. And that's how it works wherever you are, because you have a whole part of the economy in this fact, in the case that she's laying out about unaffordable rents, a very clear one that is completely outside of politics. Right? Like, you don't get to vote on how much the rent is. You don't get to vote on these kind of things. And no matter who gets into power, those forces are going to get in bed with the people in power to make sure that it doesn't happen, even like we're talking about in a state like Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, the Kilmeade question of, so what did he learn? Is he going to change careers?
Classic.
And it's like,
he's going to go and study STEM.
The opportunity here is to get the idea out there that actually, so it's available to this woman that, oh no, what I learned is that these capitalists that are in control of these things should not be in control of them anymore. And we need to, we need to basically use the state to produce housing. And that's the opportunity. So like, I honestly, when I first saw this, I thought the most annoying thing was going to be like, all the people who are saying the economy is great and why don't people just read like and to be honest, like those people, I was completely blindsided by all the people who want to make this about how well behaved they are on election day.
That's the best way to put it.
Jesus Christ. But anyway, folks,
it's a symptom of a really fucked up system.
It's a soul sickness. It really is. Folks, I'm going to, after, you'll probably listen to this on Sunday. Later this evening, I'm going to do maybe around 5 Eastern, 6 Eastern. I'm going to do a stream on Twitch of this game, Shadows of Doubt, where I play a detective and try to solve murders. Anyway, David is in the middle of a move. I won't be here on Tuesday for the interview, but I think we'll maybe try to, we'll see what's going on this week. But anyway, see you folks.